Welcome back to the Burning the Red Shirt podcast. I'm your host, Zach Tao. Once again, I have Chris K and Andrew Katz with me. We're going to talk about just really a couple suggestions thrown to us by our followers. What we have 49 followers now. We're growing, guys.
All of them.
Yeah. And then we got a couple just topics as we usually like to do, ramble on about things and things come up. So first things first, you guys doing good tonight?
Doing great. Good basketball weekend.
Better than I expected. It was a day for a Monday, kind of commuting to work, which is, more rare than I would like it to be for me. I live in Jersey City, would like to get into New York 3 days a week. It never happens. But started the week off right, and then just kind of got dragged to hell by clients because they're clients today. So, but I generally, when that happens, I feel like by the end of the day, I'm ready to just ghost you guys. But I'm feeling pretty good. I've been living super healthy the last couple of weeks, so that is going to improve you in all sorts of ways, right? Mentally, physically, make you more resilient against the tasks of the day. So I'm feeling good. I'm ready to do this.
Nice. Yeah. I had it's free cone day at Dairy Queen, and my wife, of course, wanted a Blizzard because that's what my wife does on free cone day. So I ate 2 ice cream cones. So I'm feeling right.
So Andrew's living super healthy. Chris is going the other route.
Yeah. Yeah. I hit the double cone and we'll see what happens.
Nice. All right. Well, we can kind of jump in to, I guess, the first suggested thing. CFF Jared, he posted on Twitter, he said, I think y'all should discuss your favorite rule changes for leagues. The CFF game is constantly evolving. Which recent changes do you like and which ones do you not? Now, we talked a little bit before we went live that there's not a whole lot that we necessarily implement this year, but the thing we did implement in our dynasty is having 3 contingency spots for injuries or opt-outs or whatever that late scratches. How do you guys generally feel about that?
So I somewhat think about it through the lens of kind of similar to when I set up when I work on projects on behalf of customers for the SaaS platform that I work on. One of my guiding principles is I can't set up something that's going to kill the value prop for them, in the sense that I can't create more work for them than it would be, and then they just end up churning. They end up leaving us as customers, and then that's not great. So similar, when I think about what's gonna be best for a league, and I never want any responsibility in leagues because I always want to be one of the people. I always just want to be a competitor. I don't want to feel like I have any level of control over the league and contain it in any way. I never want to commish, but when I'm voting on stuff or trying to just think about what's gonna be the best for the league, generally, I don't want to put more work on the commissioner's plate because I feel like that's just bad for the long-term health of the league. And if it's a league I enjoy, that's probably not for the best. Just put something forth for the short term that's going to end up killing the league. You're built different, right? You actually like to commish, which is it doesn't make any sense to me.
Weird.
But most people kind of see it as an administrative chore to actually run a commissioner league.
Well, I'll say this as speaking to that. I like to commish not because I like the extra work and the headache that it brings sometimes, but I like there's when I'm setting up a league, I hate being in a league where I'm man, I wish they did this, or I wish they did this. I'm just going to do it the way I want to do it. And I'll have people, if they want to play, do it. If not, not. This is a complete dictatorship, but no, I just feel like I've joined so many leagues where they do 4 points for passing touchdowns. God, who does that? So
anyway, I thought we did for the longest time, but I guess
you and Andrew both. Nope, we do 6. No, just things little scoring tweaks, and then if I want to kind of play with scoring, I can. Just the little tweaks, and obviously I don't make just I'm gonna make a change and then that's it. I usually run it by everybody in the league. We take a vote, and if you guys still vote it down, I try to still tweak it in a way. So I'm gonna change something, but it maybe not in the original form. But anyway, that's my
I mean the idea of like I'm in a redraft league that also does something similar with the idea that you can declare players that will swap in the event of a late scratch or something along those lines. They do it with you just email the commish sometime during the week. I always forget. Everyone forgets. Last year in the playoffs, I actually remembered. I sent it in, and I had a guy get scratched who I started, and then all my subs got scratched as well. So it was great. So that's how I went down in the playoffs in that league. And I had a total monster team too. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I understand why those things are great, but I mean, I enjoy so many of the idiosyncrasies and just things that are imperfect about college fantasy football that I'm cool kind of leaning into to that extent. Yeah. Nate, right? CFF Nate, he's all about season-long managed leagues that you don't set rosters that you actually are best ball, which I mean, I would like to play one just to see what it's like. I think in a lot of ways my strengths and my style of how I play would fit perfectly with that. Like I never win your league for one reason. I don't really know the rules, right? But another, I'm not that good at game day decisions in your league. And I generally build my team in your league through the prism of just collecting talent and collecting a lot of wide receiver talent more specifically, which I mean, with wide receivers being more volatile, like I'm usually trying to figure out which of these 14 guys can fit into seven spots, and I always choose wrong.
I'm the same way. I'm the same.
Yeah, I would say I don't mind the rule. I think we do 3, and that feels like the right amount. You know, it's like I basically, when I do it, I don't know if I'm doing it right or whatever, but I just pick a quarterback, a running back, and a receiver. That way, you know, I'm covered, right? Go figure.
That's probably what I should declare. Make everybody do one of each. That way, there's no I got 3 receivers. How do you pick between them? I always just say the lowest scoring of it, so it's not like you're getting you can pick 3 home run hitters and 1 pops and you take him.
Yeah, it kind of gives you that upside ability, that shot at something crazy. I mean, the best ball idea is interesting because it kind of eliminates the need for that rule of designate, right? It just completely gets rid of it. Yeah. But I'm kind of like you guys. I don't, not necessarily that I'm good or bad at picking the matchups and which one to, play. I just don't I pay attention so much to daily fantasy in the morning on Saturdays that the first thing I think of is shoot, I got to get fix all these lineups before 12 o'clock. And then I don't even think about my dynasty teams. So I'll say that's why I always lose, is that I'm just more focused and I don't play the matchups right. But I don't know. We play in degen enough leagues where, ideas of expanding rosters and stuff like that have already been done. Mm-hmm. And we already start a ton of guys anyways.
Are we
20 leagues? So
we're in year 7 or 8. After about 3 or 4 years, you've kind of made all the drastic changes you're probably going to make.
I would say one thing that was really big in this CFB Winning Edge league that we're in, I think, Andrew, you're in that, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
I think, okay, yeah, you're not. Mike and Josh, a bunch of the guys are, and it became this crazy, for lack of better words, well, I don't want to make it not safe for work, crapshoot of what was happening, because people would just trade, in week 10, the trade deadline had just finally hit, and people were trading a second rounder for Kenneth Walker. And it was well, this is just becoming stupid. Teams that had built their team really well. And I mean, I exploited it too, just because everybody else was. So I think if there's a rule that I like for Dynasty, it's implement something where the trade deadline's super early. Yeah. Not week 1 or 2, obviously, but week 4 or 5 or 6, where that tanking is, a little bit harder to do because there's a lot of time left.
We all know who tanks and who's not. Who's got, looking at everybody's roster, you could say, okay, this team has no shot. They're going to tank, right? I probably should move the trade deadline up. I think last year was week 8 or something like that. I kind of felt like it should have been a week or 2 earlier than that. Yeah. But that's something you can change though, kind of on the fly. Going into the season, you say, okay, this is the trade deadline. Like that's not something that people would be like, oh man, it was week 8 last year. Why is it week 7? Like it's usually
If you change your dynasty league to a best ball format, like Nate's talking about, you need to give it a couple of years, maybe at least one season before you can do it. But something like a trade deadline is
well, like in our dynasty,
fine.
We had to make it to where you couldn't add players like once the playoffs started, because all the teams that didn't make the playoffs were like cutting all their seniors, grabbing all these guys for next year, and it kind of ruins the whole dynasty part of it, because like the people that are in the playoffs aren't going to start cutting their seniors. They're winning for now, and everyone else is building like for next year. So you have to.
There's so much eligibility these days, right? Like think about guys that are. But your point is right? Like even if you have an early trade deadline, you like what's the point of holding a 5th or 6th year senior?
But you make that cut in week 6 versus week 10.
Yeah, we do this. We vetted this out ad nauseum in my home league, and our trade deadline is now. It's always mid-October. It's around like that week 7-ish thing, and it works pretty well. It definitely forces people into making more interesting decisions. Wes's league, Chris, played out the exact same way with people just doing ridiculous stuff. Like, I think it's like for a league to like be in its best place, it's super important for that to kind of be that setting to be done right.
Now, like in our dynasty, it's not really a rule change, but like, have you noticed as the years have gone by, there's not like all these like this frantic trade period from like January to April, where first few years it was like every day there was like 2 or 3 trades. It seemed like
that's because I was offering all the trades.
So now it's like everybody's real quiet, and then it gets to like June, July, then it starts heating up and people start making those trades as after spring practice and then leading into the fall camps. But no, like the trade deadline is the big issue, but I wanted to bring that up because I've noticed that the last couple of years. So I guess as far as other changes, like Chris and I were talking before you got here, Andrew, that it really just depends on your league, like what rule changes work, because like we said earlier, like we start 2 quarterbacks in our league, but we have 20 teams in our league. Starting 3 really starts to test like who has a really great team and who doesn't.
I tried to stage a coup in your league for multiple years to push us from 2 to 3. Like I feel pretty strongly that if you're only starting 2 quarterbacks in almost every league, you're not hitting the player pool to enough where you're having to make materially difficult decisions, both from a draft, from a free agency perspective, and from a week-to-week roster setting perspective. Like you need to be running out 3 quarterbacks in there, or having a really large amount of teams in your league.
Well, I somewhat agree, but you also don't want the whole league to be like quarterback dependent. Like if you have 3 quarterbacks that you're starting and they're all good, it doesn't really matter who you picked as your running backs and receivers.
But we also have so many running backs and receivers start that like if your running back 1 is pretty average, what's going to happen in your flex spots?
Yeah.
It's interesting with the 20 teams. We have 2 starters. But like I know Bainbridge is a big proponent of it. Like you have to have a stud quarterback. So I think you end up still drafting a good bit of them.
He says that, but he's not walking the walk anymore. Have you noticed all his drafts? He's trying to be one of the cool kids now and not taking quarterbacks early anymore. He used to be quarterback. Maybe I don't. Did he
now
finally
he's
dig into
heavy
the data?
Receivers? He's heavy receivers.
Did he dig into the data and finally realize that narrative he was trying to drive home just wasn't any good?
Well, you take that up with him. If I say something about championships with him, he gets all mad because I won one. Maybe that's a good pivot to best ball, because I know the other question was based around best ball strategy.
From Heath T. Boyd on Twitter,
who put together some good numbers to make me look above average about Corey Rucker.
Yeah, I was going to get to that, but if you want to,
I mean,
Heath's the man. He's in the 50 team league that you guys aren't cool enough to be in anymore. But he did some of Jared's best balls as well. It took he had like 10 followers going into like all of last year, and I followed him because I was like, this guy's cool as shit and knows his shit. And it took him a year and change to get back to me. You think I would have enough political capital to drag the follow out of him sooner than that, but apparently not.
You got to work for it, man. Like the work he puts into those.
But now he's finally like active on Twitter and showing out. So good for him.
Yeah. Well, he made an interesting point, basically calling Corey Rucker average.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of calmed down. I think people got so jacked up about like some college news with a guy that people knew that all of a sudden it's like he's some superstar, awesome player. Where is he going to go? Yet he still hasn't gone anywhere. And now people are like, he should go to Texas State or Utah State or South Alabama. Yeah. All worthy options, and it makes sense. But at first it was like, well, maybe he's going to Ole Miss, or, you know, maybe he's going to follow this, that, and the other. And now it's kind of died down to Utah State.
You took him early in the last draft we did, right?
Well, I didn't think it was early, but apparently it was. So
it was pretty early. It was like
I took him 6th round. Well, I just figured this was 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And I just was kind of thinking, well, if he hits the right spot, like that's a great.
Yeah.
But it just depends. He's got to hit the right spot.
Yeah, it could go. Yeah, it could go well. It could go pretty poorly.
Yeah, that whole Rucker thread, I definitely got that notification, and I'm like, oh man, this guy went.
Yeah, he used Rucker there.
Hey, you know what? That's what we love here.
So best ball strategy, Andrew. I was trying to think of like what my firm answer would be. I have a loose idea of what I like, but what do you have an idea of what you want to do each and every best ball?
I mean, my overarching strategy has been pretty consistent since we started playing best ball, which is just lean into the things that I feel strongly about, and try to avoid kind of going with the crowd to that extent, and just taking players that are quote unquote falling, or just basing moves that I make based on prevailing opinions. Like, and the reason for that really is, in my opinion, like CFF, ADP, anything that kind of any way you want to really phrase that or think about it is super inefficient because the information we have is so generally poor, right? And as a result of that, as opposed to other sports like the NFL, right? I think that there's just going to be so much more that is wrong with everyone's draft. Like so many people, everybody's going to get so many things wrong. So I just wanted to lean into the opinions that I feel like are going to be right and base my drafts upon those. Overall this year, I mean, I feel like I have been going pretty running back heavy early on in most drafts. Like we've basically been doing two types of drafts, you and I, Chris, like the ones that Mike runs that are half PPR, and then Greg's insane, like full PPR, but 2 PPR for tight ends. And we've only done one of those so far, but I love those drafts. I love Greg's format. But even in that one, I went more heavily than most, I think, on running backs so far. And it's basically just because possibly just as a result of, I haven't truly dug into a lot of the running back situations, but I feel more confident in identifying receivers later than I do running backs later in my draft. So I like to work backwards when it comes to filling out my draft vision. I'll figure out my end game picks for the back half of the draft, and then I'll use that to inform what I want to do from a structural perspective earlier on. So if I feel really strong about like 6, 7 wide receivers I want to take later on, and then I maybe only need like 3 receivers earlier on in the draft, and maybe I only like a couple of late-round running backs. Well, then that probably means that I need to go heavier on running back earlier on.
Yeah, I'm with you, Andrew. Like, I've gone pretty heavy running backs too. Depending on where I pick, I see what quarterbacks are available, and I might grab one. But if I don't feel like the value's there, I'll grab another running back. I think one of them, I've only been in 2 so far, but I think one of them I went running back, and I didn't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
like you said, receivers, you feel like, you've got a bunch of guys that you like, that you feel that you can get later that might plan out for you. Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you at the same strategy, honestly. But with this 35 round ones that we did, right? Like when you get down past round, I'd say 20, 25, you start just saying, okay, when did I take this guy last draft? Let me see how long I can go until I don't take him, like until he's still there. Do you guys do that?
Feels like it, yeah.
Like when you do
that was some of the things that they were thinking about. Like some of the guys were making comments. I kind of compare it to like a rookie draft in the offseason, like a freshman draft, where it's like the first, pending how big your league is, maybe 3 rounds. So like anywhere from 45 to 60 picks, maybe to 75. So maybe like 4th round. There's like a legit, these are the 60, 70 guys that are going to be picked. But then what you end up finding is, again, complete crapshoot afterwards. You can take a guy in the 5th round that you probably could have gotten in the 9th round of a rookie, like a freshman draft. Like the value of those picks is just so wildly crazy. It's almost like what's a 5th rounder doesn't matter. Just have 4 to 9. 4 in the 9th round, you're probably going to get something similar.
Yeah.
But I think Andrew's not here to not defend it, but comment on it. But a good point on the ADP stuff. Like we're super early to begin with, but we've also kind of like, and I love it because there's a lot of like random crazy people that I'm following that just give good info or just interesting info. Maybe if I don't even think it's right, it's still interesting.
Anyway.
There's a lot of like good stats and value behind it that I'm just like, oh, I don't know if I agree with it, but it seems like you worked hard at it, and I can respect that. But it's like now we're getting like these C2C, the Devi, and the CFF guys. So the ADP of these things is wild sometimes where, some C2C guys get in a best ball and all of a sudden these random guys are getting picked a little bit earlier that are just a little bit more atypical. So I think the ADP data is kind of, especially in March right now, is pretty bad.
Let me ask you this. So when you are drafting, let's say a guy that you really like, do you take him early or late to, I guess, manipulate ADP in a way? Like, do you think about that? Like, you get what I'm asking? Maybe not.
I don't think there's really a way to manipulate it like in your favor, because you're just not going to end up getting him potentially, right? Yeah. Like if there's a guy that you can take the risk to wait, but I think a lot of people do the opposite.
Well,
I think Andrew's probably the same way. If this is my guy, I'm going to get him. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, like the Fantrax takes, whenever they come out with the ADP data, like I'm assuming they take these drafts into account, right? These ones in
probably anything on the
March.
I can guarantee you their ADP is not sophisticated. Like they need to add more filters, more ways to segment the data and allow you to adjust for that relative to your league settings when you want to actually understand and interpret ADP data. I'm sure right now it's just like a straight average of this guy across all the leagues. Like, based on what we saw in terms of like the weird numbers.
That's kind of goes with my point about ADP data, just generally speaking, right? Like the C2C guys are probably taking the guys that are legit, but maybe it's more like in these Twitter polls where it's like, who would you rather have? And people just aren't being specific enough with what they're asking, that like you get one crowd voting one way, which is right, but it's just not the right format. So then you see all this like mixing and matching. It's just very interesting, but I don't know.
Yeah. All right. There was another topic we wanted to discuss, and I don't remember what it was, but best ball strategy. Oh, I did want to say that I'll just go out and say I'm not a huge fan of best ball. I'll do them, but I'm not a big fan. You guys do a way more than I do. I prefer the whole choosing a lineup thing that Andrew was talking about earlier, mainly because it it kind of puts you in a more managing situation versus here's my team, the best players are picked. I don't have to do any managing of that team. And I guess that's what I enjoy about college fantasy anyway. But I figured I'd throw that out there because there's probably people that are the same way.
The perspectives I look at it are primarily for best ball. Well, I guess two things. One, I mean, as much as it pains me to admit I don't know everything when it comes to college football and college fantasy football, and people we play with in these leagues are pretty smart. So it definitely informs your research and your strategy and stuff like that. So it's beneficial in that way. But also, most primarily, I would say, like, I spend a ton of time researching all this stuff, investing my time in this, and I want to see that translate to hopefully financial gain, right? And you just do through in-season managed leagues, it's really tough to get down enough money to actually make it feel like it's worth it for all the time that you're investing into this. So this allows me an outlet to actually get more money down on these players and these takes that I have, and hopefully translate that to some cash. I also like I'm fucking sadistic. I like to build a spreadsheet that tracks all of my best balls and every week update how I'm doing in all of them. And I was doing it every single Sunday last year, like Sunday morning, wake up, go to ballet with my daughter, and intermittently as she's kind of doing that, I'm updating my best balls and like seeing how better or worse I'm faring relative to previous weeks.
That is it. That's Andrew move. But I think it's smart though, right? Like this is the time of year where there's nothing going on. So like it allows you to be able to get more money in on the action. And it also is like entertainment because it's March and like what else are we doing? You know?
Definitely.
A couple months it's gonna be dead of summer baseball. If you're following it, it's been 2 months, you know. So I like it. It's just something fun to do. I mean, a lot of it's not like a crazy amount of money unless you play a lot of them, or like you're just very successful at it. And that's just not. I'm not playing a ton of them, nor am I very successful at them. So,
but you're in the Greg Champions series then.
Well, yeah,
you got roped. You got peer pressure.
I mean, he told me who else was in it, so I had to do it. It is
nice.
To go back to it with the tight end premium. It's just insane.
It's the best.
Kyle went Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer as his first 2 picks. And I was like, that's actually not a horrible idea.
Yeah.
Not with double PPR, no.
So
something Andrew said, other than making me now tag this podcast as explicit, he said something that I've asked a question in our chat a few days ago, maybe yesterday, actually, about college fantasy football in general. I know a lot of people are talking about it going mainstream and all that stuff. And I posed the question of, do you think CFF loses a lot of the reasons we like it if it becomes mainstream? And what I was kind of meaning by that was like, we love the grind of digging for the information. That it's not just handed to us and you use that to your advantage. And then Andrew replied. Actually, I like Andrew to give his take on it, like because you said I had it in the reverse order.
Yeah. I wish I could.
I've got it right here. You want me to read it?
Articulate it as eloquently as it was running through my head at the time, but it's
because you said it becomes more mainstream because it
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a good point. Okay, so I mean, for so many of the people that are not presently our audience, right? I think that an outlet, a gateway to getting those people into college fantasy, right, is removing a lot of what any sane person would admit is our barriers to entry, right? Real depth charts that actually have meaning, real injury reports before games, leading up to games, stuff of that ilk. I think all that stuff is part of what makes college fantasy great personally, and I also think it lends itself to there being a real edge that can be established from the perspective of how I play the game. So I think that while those things like would most likely translate to the game being more mainstream, I think they would compromise, in my opinion, what makes the game great. But so I'm gonna just derail this topic right now. Do you remember, right, like days before DFS became like a presidential topic in whatever election that was, I guess 2016, right? Like Bruce Feldman and whoever he was writing with at the time, like these people were putting college DFS lineups on their like Fox and ESPN like content, like as close to front page, as close to as mainstream as you could possibly get. Like we were right on the cusp without compromising any of what I like to think of as makes college fantasy great. Like we were right there, and then regulation, media that doesn't understand what they're talking about, all the like that like the DFS conversation was like the first time, or one of the first times, that I really realized that so many things that a lot of people whose job it is to cover a wide breadth of topics, like it's impossible for these people to actually have the requisite knowledge to actually cover them in a way that even in any way mirrors the depth and the understanding of those topics that we do. Then they have to fake it and they have to pretend. It's the same thing with like when you hear like Stephen A. Smith talk about something like, I like living here in New York. I've heard Stephen A. Smith do broadcast radio for when he used to have like a show in the NYC area and just do radio and talk basketball. It's awesome. The dude knows basketball. But when you ask him to cover all these different topics in sports, of course he's gonna like it's not going to be the same quality. But I think we saw that play out when that like DFS came into the mainstream and became a hot topic in presidential election, which is like still like impossible to even fathom that actually happened. But when that happened, right, we were right there to like having college DFS be a thing that like was part of mainstream society, and then it had to go and run away and hide again. So I don't know, because we were right there to shifting the paradigm and without having to compromising any of the things that I feel make the game great. It makes me question, do we actually need to have these things that we feel like need to happen and would arguably ruin the product? Do they need to happen to rope in more people? It's probably the easiest path, but I don't know how necessary it actually is. I don't know what needs to change to get us back to where we were, the place I remember so vividly. Like I feel like some things probably need to happen. I don't know what they are though.
I think 2 points on that would be, I think you can have like the injury announcements and stuff and not ruin anything, right? Like I think you're right. Like a lot of the cool parts of like looking in the off season right now, the cool part about college fantasy football is like every time I see Miles Price get drafted in like the second or third round, I'm like just baffled. But then like I get proven wrong, maybe I get proven right. Like that's a whole fun conversation to have, and we don't necessarily have that if everybody knows a proven, hey, this guy's starting or this is the depth chart and all that.
Well, real quick, I want to jump into that. Like the NFL, you only have 53 active players, right?
Right.
College, I don't think is there a limit? Like I'm sure there's a limit, right? But I know
there's like 80 scholarships.
80 scholarships, but you have walk-ons and you
got like 100 guys on the team.
Yeah, you can have 100 guys on the team, and there could be a guy that's a walk-on who they have not talked about at all, and he's starting in the slot. I mean, like that's the kind of stuff that happens, but you would only maybe know that if you dug into that team's spring practices or
the thing that when I think about the edge that I gain from college fantasy football, it's because so much is difficult to quantify at so many parts of the cycle of a college fantasy football season. Eventually, there's enough information where people like Chris can plug into their spreadsheets and do well, right? But that's not the case, I think, most of the time. And a counter argument to like some of the stuff I was saying is, well, that's always probably be the case because of the obvious reality of college football, where like these guys are only on the team for upwards of 7 or 8 years at this point, but generally 4, right? So it's not like NFL where there's so much, maybe consistency is not the right word, but there's so much like you can generally plug stuff into spreadsheets and spit out solid ADP, solid projections. Going into a college fantasy season, I think it's extremely difficult. I mean, Chris, how how quickly do you feel like your projections actually start to there must be some convergence in terms of new information coming to light that makes your projections more closer to to reality, right? Like I assume week 1 you're a little farther off than where you are like as the season goes on, right?
Yeah, I would say like week 1, it's more if I know who the running, like if I get it right for snap counts for like a running back or something, or like a receiver, like I'm in a better spot than everybody else. But there's so many times, but what that leads you to is I think this is how it's going to play out. And then I have a ton of them and that's not how it plays out. So I'm just toast. But then I also like nail this, I nail that. But it doesn't necessarily even matter because I got 40% of a lineup that's got a guy with 4 points. It takes, I mean, it's got to be 10 weeks before I feel like, because if you look at all the percentages of snap counts and targets, and you have the first 4 games are against garbage teams, so those numbers are skewed. I mean, it takes almost a full season before you can really start to feel like you have it. But I mean, that everybody's on the same boat is the thing, right? So it's more, I think, at that point you have to figure out your style of play. Like, are you the type that goes kind of all in, where it's like I'm banking and betting on myself, or am I going to play play the median game a little bit and not necessarily go heavy or heavier than you would like on a certain guy? But it's college. I mean, these guys like out of nowhere will not play or like have 3 touchdowns. Like that's kind of like what makes college fantasy football cool, right? Is like we laugh about these guys that score five touchdowns, like Jarrett Patterson going for like 80 points one week. Or who was that Colorado State running back that was just amazing? Like
Bibbs.
Yeah. Capri Bibbs, right? It was awesome. Like that was so fun, right? Yeah. So I think there's no changing that. I think it was like the hot button question. I feel like the last 10 days was like, how do you make fantasy college football mainstream? And some of the ideas or some of the reasons of why it's not mainstream or how to make it mainstream make a lot of sense. But one of them that like was thrown out was like, well, you can just change the format of how you play, like make your roster smaller or only do P5 because, right, the general public doesn't want to have to figure out who the running back for Colorado State is. And, oh, by the way, you got it wrong or you didn't even know to roster that guy and he had 5 touchdowns and you automatically lose. So, like, it kind of comes back to bite. But, like, I don't want to sacrifice leagues. And I'm not playing in every league, so it doesn't matter. But it takes away the uniqueness of fantasy college football in that New Mexico State might win one game this year, but, like, their running back might be a top 10 running back in the country.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it, too, is in college, their lineups can change week to week based on tons of factors, right? Kids academically ineligible, or he had a great week at practice. Freshman showed out at practice. They're going to give him snaps. Where in the NFL, this is the line. This is the depth chart right here. This is the active roster. The third wide receiver, he's going to play. You know who the receivers are that are going to play versus in college. Like, yeah, you know who the main guys might be, but they're still in those
kind of driven by money, right? Like in baseball, there was an interesting quote or mini anecdote about how this minor league baseball player anonymously was like, minor league baseball is kind of brutal or messed up because I could be great and it doesn't matter. They just gave this guy $2 million signing bonus out of high school, so he's going to play. And you kind of get that in the NFL, right? Like if the Lions pay up $15 million for a receiver, like I guarantee you he's going to be a top 2 or 3 receiver. But like you said, Zach, like in college, anything could happen. A lot of these coaches, for the most part, not all of them, obviously, like just want to win, and they're totally cool with replacing a guy if it's not working out. Whereas, the others is not necessarily the case.
I was talking with Brian with CFB Dynasty, and like he has a group text, and he was asking these kind of like, what are the barriers to entry and stuff. I'm not going to go over all of them, but somebody said that, for example, like with coaches not giving information, like they only give what they want to give. They don't have to talk about injuries. They don't have to talk about lineups. They don't have to give you anything. And somebody says, or they do crap to throw people off, like Hawaii quarterback warming up with McDonald's jersey on.
I forgot about that one.
Like that stuff doesn't fly in the NFL. They're not gonna go for that. But in college, it's completely fair game. We're gonna just throw off the other team, like, oh, he's playing, and then he's really in the locker room. Or like that few podcasts ago, you were talking about CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah.
How he says he's playing, he's like all hyped before the game, he's gonna play, and then he doesn't do anything.
That one still stings.
But you didn't have to bring that one up, Zach.
But no, it kind of goes to the point whereas like in the NFL, they would have to declare what his injury status is.
Yeah.
Whereas at Oklahoma, they could say, oh yeah, he's perfectly fine, perfectly healthy, and he doesn't even get snaps. Like, I think, did Boise do that with Hank Bachmeier? Oh yeah, he's healthy, he's good to go, and then he's not even dressed out.
Yeah, the injury stuff is like it's a combination with the coaches, right? Like when like Blake Corum was, of course he's going to be healthy and getting a bunch of snaps. It's been like 3 weeks since he last since we last heard that he was really close to playing. Yeah. And then you only heard positive things, and then he gets like 10% of snaps. So like that stuff is always going to be frustrating. It's what makes it.
And I also wonder, like in college, like these coaches kind of ride the hot hand versus where in the NFL, like these guys are making this big money. It's like, I got to give this guy the ball. We're paying him 18.
Or I look like an idiot, or I make my GM look like an idiot.
Whereas like in college, this kid comes up and he's just lighting it up at practice. Like, why not give this kid some touches? Like, he's earned it versus the NFL. I mean,
they run 100 plays. You can sacrifice 5.
Yeah. I think there's we could go talk about barriers to entry and all that kind of stuff is why it's so much different. But I did want to throw that in there because I felt like it was something kind of hot this week that people had talked about. You guys have anything to add to that?
Nothing to add.
Comprehensive.
Yeah, you could do this for hours on
subject. Other than that, I think that's short and sweet tonight. Unless you guys have a different topic that you want to.
We want to make a trade, man. Andrew comes to me and says, yes. I'm bored. Let's make a trade. I want Marvin. I want Mims. And I had to we're at the point of the off season where I'm like, wait, I have a Mims. Which Mims do I have? And I realized Marvin Mims. And so I came to Andrew with, I believe, a very fair offer.
It's a great offer. Antonio Brown for Marvin Mims, right? I mean,
straight up.
Here, let's go through some pros and cons. Like I'm starting to collate a proprietary fade list of players this year. It's about 5-6 players deep that I just want no part of on any of the teams I'm drafting from scratch this year. Brown's definitely one of them, but I feel like he's got a lot of name value. A lot of people are on him, right? Such as yourself. So I feel like I can kind of pick and choose what I want to get back for him. And in line with what I kind of articulated earlier about how I'm traditionally build my dynasty teams, I want to try and veer away from just stacking endless receivers in our college dynasty league because I know my strengths. I know my weaknesses. I'm just not that great at setting lineups every week. I'm probably going to screw it up when it counts. I do it every year. So I've got only 3 running backs right now, I think. And it's basically the dude on UMass and Anturia. So trading away one of them to bring back Mims. I honestly was hoping you would just do something dumb and ask for something not that good for Mims, which, I mean, I should have moved quicker. If maybe it's Fantrax's fault for not being up early enough before Mims started moving up boards in a lot of the drafts. I mean, it's my fault. I've been kind of pushing him up myself a little bit with some of the drafting we've been doing. But I mean, I kind of feel like I have no true incentive to move to do this right now, in the sense that I feel like Ontario is going to continue to keep building up. Your team is stacked with receivers, so you'll probably continue to be cool to move Mims. I feel like I probably just sit tight for now. If the idea is to just keep it to Ontario for Mims, I see how the spring plays out, or if I get super bored. I'm going to a wedding next weekend, so I'll be blasted all weekend. So maybe that's the point of where we actually get to the finish line. But for now, I feel like really it's just the main thing is I want to try and actually try and do something in this league this year when it comes to playoff time, and continuing to just build with receivers probably isn't going to do it. I tried to. I think I already mentioned I tried to move Worthy tonight, Xavier Worthy for Travion Henderson, and that'll kind of rectify that problem a little bit. If I get that done, then maybe I pull the trigger here as well to kind of because I'll be feeling a little bit about where I'm at from a running back perspective. Even so, what I'm trying to say is it was my idea, and now I'm saying no for the immediate.
You're backing off. I think your running back group's a little bit better than you're giving it, though. Keaton Thompson, do we think he keeps running back status?
Who knows? It's Fantrax, dude. Like
you got Braden Bennett. He's
I forgot.
good.
Yeah, I do have Braden.
And you have Merriweather. It's not the sexiest of running back groups.
It's not where you want to be. Like,
but I mean,
but you probably
have 3 flex. You got to play. You got a ton of receivers you can play.
I've made this mistake before where at the positions like running back and quarterback in leagues like this one where it's like, oh, you just start 2, you have 3 and you're good to go, and then 2 weeks into the season, one's benched, another's hurt, and you're skimming the waiver wire for street trash. So I would like to avoid that scenario. As confident as I am in my ability to kind of find gold on waivers generally, and I like that. Maybe this kind of dovetails into another reason why I like best ball so much as well. Like once the season starts, it's a whirlwind of week after week, like trying to carve out. Like I've got the calendar invites for myself set to like put in the time to actually do waiver claims and stuff like that. I've gotten a little bit better at it, but I mean, my calendar's only getting crazier year after year with like personal and professional stuff, right? So trying to find the time to do waiver claims. I know that I feel more confident in my ability to assess pre-draft and in the offseason than I do in my ability to manage a team effectively in season. So that's another reason for why I lean so heavily into best ball.
So let me ask you, I'm not going to do it, but this was the other player I was entertaining it for. It's another running back. But like for me, I don't have a reason to trade Mims because I obviously would need him starting, and my depth is a little bit thin. So if I'm going to move somebody, I need to do it with the purpose. So my thought is like I can get rid of a great receiver, but I need someone with 2 years back, and I'll take a little bit of risk in hopes that maybe I get 2 years, because I'm going to lose a ton, like literally Hendon Hooker, Bryce Young, Jordan Addison, Keyshawn Booty.
Life is tough to be Chris. In this
Valde is probably gone, like a lot of old guys. So I'm thinking, where can I get young? Would you have said yes to Braden Bennett, Coastal Carolina?
Dude, you're coming for my child, my boy.
I know, but I got to ask.
This is like the problem that I've encountered in our league. It's not in all leagues. I'm pretty good at just like acquiring talent that like I both do truly like love so many of these players, and then I just refuse to trade them. But also like I'll end up with players that I drafted just because I think they'll be good, and it's fine. It did pan out, but then I'll be cool moving them. But in this league, like this. In Zach's league, I have so many of my sons on my team that it makes it problematic to actually trade. Like the most likely guy that I trade this offseason is probably Xavier Worthy, and Ontario when the time is right for the right pieces back. Like I'm not super attached to either of those guys, but in this league, like Braden, you're coming for someone that's near and dear to my heart.
No. Just quickly realized, and this is gonna just really show how degenerate we are. Did you guys know that Joseph Manjack transferred to Houston?
I did.
Nobody wanted to tell me.
Do you own him?
Yeah. I mean, because why not get a receiver that like was a freshman and got snaps? But thank God he's out of there, because there was.
Yeah.
I mean, Brew McCoy is going to go back there. Not to mention all the other guys they got. That's going to be good for him, right? Houston. I mean.
Yeah,
it's just not the same mold as the typical.
They brought in some absurd receiver recruit, Matthew Golden, that like all the Devi and C2C guys are all over. But
it's like highest Houston recruit ever, right?
Yeah, I feel like how can you be higher recruited than Greenberry though? Greenberry was like a true 5-star, wasn't he?
I think he was technically a 4, like in some of the.
Yeah,
I could be wrong. But
it sucks. He didn't. How did he not pan out in the NFL? Like, if you're like a 4 or 5-star and you put up production in CFB, you should be a first-round pick. Like, what's the problem?
Yeah. One I compared to him was Green Beckham.
I was literally just thinking Dorial Green Beckham.
And I remember like, oh man, he's going to be a superstar. And then it just never happened. And like you give him the leash of like, okay, next year he's going to be great. And then you're like, okay, this is a senior year. He's going to be awesome this year. And then it just doesn't happen. It's just he's just okay.
They both ended their college careers with like amazing bowl games though. DGB in that, weren't they in SEC championship or no?
They were hitting some SEC championships that like early to mid.
Yeah, he like I remember him having an incredible close to his college career, and Greenberry did too in the bowl game. He had like 3 touchdowns, and then was like, "Peace, I'm out." And everyone's like, "Dude, you're like projected to go on undrafted. Like, what are you doing?"
Did you guys see the JT Daniels?
Are there rumors?
Thoughts? The thought is that he's down to West Virginia, Missouri. That's what just made me think about it. And one other school that's not all that just similar, Oregon State. With that being said, I mean, what would you want?
If I were, well, I think what I want as someone who's drafted him in every single league except for one of the like 6 or 7 best balls I've done so far, I think what I want aligns to what I think will actually happen. I think he goes to West Virginia. Like I would put them as a heavy favorite. I think it makes sense for so many reasons. Like Jared and Nate covered a lot of it on their podcast as well, right? That like the QB situation's like super unsettled there. Just stealing straight from what Nate was saying. Like the coach said something along the lines of like, we're not taking a transfer in the spring because we want to see what's good with the guys we have here. Basically, like like those guys aren't going to be good, right? So then you're just going to take JT in the summer. Graham Harrell's there. Who knows how they got along, but you got to figure like it didn't like the fallout at USC happened for JT because he got hurt. He ripped his leg apart, right? And then Slovis just came in and balled out in the Fresno game. They upset Stanford and he just runs away with the job. And then JT's out the door. Like what? Nothing about that suggests that he has a bad relationship with Graham Harrell. It's just like that's what you got to do when you're a 5-star and you lose your job to a true freshman, right? So I mean, it makes so much sense. Like I don't know what, maybe there are connections to those other places, Missouri and Oregon State, but I think he goes to West Virginia.
I think that makes the most sense. And the C2C and like Jared and Nate did a great job of discussing like why it made so much sense. It's also pretty funny. I don't know exactly when that quote was from the coach, but it's never a good sign when your coach says that. And then like a couple weeks later, it's like JT Daniels might go to West Virginia. It's like, okay, so we already know how the spring went. We're not very thrilled with what's the guy's name? It's Green.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's like that guy was just like, I don't know, probably a bad comparison, but he reminds me of just like a running around with his head cut off Tate Martell. Like, but actually pretty solid at it.
Yeah, he's more known for his legs than his arm, right?
Yeah, big time. I mean, he came in over.
It's an air raid offense. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a bad fit, man. So
nice. Well, I was just reading through some tweets about him. Apparently, he was at the Mizzou spring game this past weekend. Yep, and he's supposed to visit West Virginia in April. So, if he doesn't commit to Mizzou by then.
I have such a tough time forming real opinions about Mizzou because I feel like we've seen across recent memory so many different versions of their offense in the sense that, like, okay, they didn't really have good quarterback play the past year at minimum, probably a little further back than that, right? So what we remember most recently is like super heavy running back tailored schemes, but we also have, I mean, with a different coaching staff, I think, like we have
different coaching staff, but like Mizzou's been fun in the past for fantasy perspective. Like they've thrown the ball around. Drink is from Boise originally, right?
Sorry, say that again. I was putting this comment up on the screen.
Yeah, that comment's cool. But isn't Drinkowitz from Boise originally?
Yeah. He was the OC, and then he went to what? Not NC State. Yeah, it was an NC State.
And then he became the app coach, right? Head coach.
Or app coach.
I have like this awful taste in my mouth for Missouri offenses just because of recency bias and like how poor the quarterback play has been. But I mean, I guess it's not really fair.
I mean, Missouri's like, I mean, they've had a couple guys, but like a couple guys that feel more name than like actual production. Like I feel like Missouri receivers are like 45 for 910 touchdowns. Like,
yeah,
like the big play guys, but they don't go mass volume to one. But they've also had horrible quarterbacks. Like
they had a lot of guys with targets. Like, if you look at their stats.
Yeah. Have you seen their game logs from last year? Like these game logs of receivers would run like 15 guys deep. Like part of it was probably like Mookie. I think Mookie Cooper was just like the idea was he was going to come in and be the wide receiver one last year, right?
Cooper,
and he hurt his foot in like week 1 or 2, and like barely could play snaps the rest of the year. But
I just played like literally. I think if I could probably go back to our sheet that we were doing back in the day with projections, I would probably guess all like their top 5 guys were between 10 and 11% targets, which is just never something. When you're Missouri, you're not scoring enough points to like make that a thing. But wasn't there one quarterback? Didn't he turn into like a safety for him? Like
your boy Sean Robinson.
Robinson,
TCU.
So
yeah,
that's not a good sign either. So it's hard to. That's the thing too, right? Is like you get all these situations that for a couple of years just go in this black hole of horrible quarterbacks, and then all of a sudden you're kind of skewed in terms of how good they actually can be offensively. And then, like you said, they changed coaches to someone that's definitely a producer for running back stats. So,
yeah. All right. I think that's all we've got now, right? You guys don't have any more trades?
No.
I completely forgot about the trade.
Can't forget about the trade, man. Snowballs into everything.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's it for the night. We went to about an hour again. So that's about what we normally do. So we're pretty consistent. So Andrew's got a wedding next weekend. So next Monday might be real interesting.
We can talk about the trades that actually went down.
I have a 2-night fantasy baseball draft that I think is that Sunday and Monday that I get back. So we'll figure out a date. But that's next week.
That's next week. We'll worry about that.
We'll figure something out this week coming up.
For sure. All right, guys. I think that's all we got. So until next week, whenever we decide to do it. Later.
See you guys.